Hello, everybody. Triggered but right here. Today, I will be talking about an opinion piece by the Chicago Tribune, which has been shown in my school as an assignment that we had to do of an opinion piece. Now, I will be reading this out and pointing out many of the flaws in this opinion piece and just how insane it is that anything opinion is being shown in schools. All right, let's get into it. To start off, I will be reading each page of this article and then I will give my opinion on that page. Uh, the link to the actual article will be in the description of this video if you want to read it on the actual website, but I copied it into a Google Doc for ease of reading. And yeah, so let's get started. The world is changing. Sometimes it moves more quickly than some of us are able to keep up. That's understandable. This became clear to me last week when I wrote a column about Mr. B, who used the term colored in an email regarding a piece I'd previously written about how blacks would support Michael Bloomberg if he became the Democratic presidential nominee. Emails poured in from white people who said they had no idea that colored was offensive. They asked me to explain the difference between colored and people of color. Some said they were frustrated that the goalpost for what is appropriate to call black people keeps moving. They admitted that they are tired of trying to keep up. Indeed, what is acceptable for white people to call African Americans and for black people to call themselves has evolved over the last century. The standard term has shifted from colored to Negro to black to African American, as people sought to redefine themselves and their place in America. Now in 2020, people of color is often used to refer to the collective group of non-white Americans. It is offensive to single blacks out as colored. That, in part, is because of the painful segregationist history associated with the term prior to the mid-1960s. Colored-only restrooms and water fountains are examples of harmful relics of the Jim Crow South that black people had to fight and die to remove from American culture. While the distinctions can be complicated, the information is readily available for anyone willing to seek it out. That means reading and having meaningful conversations with people of different races. The problem is that many white people aren't willing to work that hard. It is much easier to email a columnist and complain about how unfair it is that white people can't use the term colored, though the NAACP uses it in its name. Not long ago, I would have eagerly taken the time to explain that the NAACP, which was established in 1909, was founded during a time when colored was acceptable. The group has since broadened its mission to not include only African Americans, but all people of color. Now that the first page is done, I will move into my opinion section of the first page. Alright, to start off the opinion part of this video, Mr. B, I do not believe that this person exists. I get that they wouldn't want to use their name, but nobody is using the term colored in 2020. People know that the term colored is offensive. And it just baffles me. They do a page of filler about emails pouring in from white people who said they had no idea that colored was offensive. Colored, which is clearly offensive. It's literally referring to segregation and Jim Crow laws. And that is obviously offensive. You do not need to write a page about this. People understand this fact. And that that the fact that you can write an entire opinion piece, or I guess half of an opinion piece, just around a term that people have known as offensive for at least 10 years now, for at least a decade now, is insane to me. And then they immediately go into say the problem is that white people, because the problem is that white people aren't willing to work that hard. What does that even mean? What does that mean? Because there are not many people emailing you. You probably got 5 people to email you that were upset that you can't use the term colored, because obviously you can't. And I, it's not just don't be racist. It seems like a simple thing to say, but that the people who are going to be racist, and this is what I believe, the people who are going to be racist are set in their ways. So you just have to enforce a belief, not of anti-racism, because the anti-racism movement has led to many, many bad things. It is not the anti-racism movement, just a general idea of don't discriminate against people. That's the idea that you need to push across. You just need to push across. Don't discriminate. Everyone is deserving. Base everything off character. But don't hammer it into people's minds that the entire problem at all times for all racism is white people. Because the thing is, yes, we white people, not as a whole, I shouldn't say. A lot of white people have done a lot of terrible things regarding race a long time ago. We cannot hold on to that at this point. Systemic racism definitely exists in the South because racism can get passed along in families. But that will eventually die out the more we spread the idea that people should not be discriminated against. But we do not need to spread hate. And that is what is starting to happen when articles like this get written. As you will see later in the article, it gets a whole lot worse. And some of this stuff I definitely, no, I don't agree with. I shouldn't say some. I agree with one part in the statement and not even how it is used. It says reading and having meaningful conversations with people of different races. So I agree with 50% of that statement. Reading and having meaningful conversations with people of different opinions. We do not need it does not matter what race you are, cuz I could turn around with this statement. I could turn around and talk to a black conservative who would completely reinforce all of the things I believe. But no, you need to talk to people of different opinions. It has nothing to do with race. And once we start doing that more and more, and on top of reinforcing the idea that racism is bad and we should just go off of character, America will become a much, much better place. All right, let's start the second page, which gets way worse. A white woman named Elaine Soloway taught me that I shouldn't have to do the work for others. Younger African Americans have long balked at the idea that black people have an obligation to explain race to white people. They refuse to try and educate white people about what it means to be black in America. They have understood what many older black people and white people have not. The responsibility lies solely with white people, if they are interested. Hearing this from Elaine, an 81-year-old Chicago woman, struck a chord. A few years ago, she decided to read nearly every book she could get her hands on that explained the journey of black people in America. From the Underground Railroad to the Great Migration to the memoir of a black First Lady in the White House. She did this, she said, because it was the only way to make sense of the great racial divide in America and do her part to bring people together. When I started reading the history, my first response to Jim Crow and slavery was, why haven't black people killed us all? Then I began to understand the anger and disappointment of black people, she told me. She compared it to something a lifelong friend who survived the Holocaust once told her. We thought that when we came home, people would put us on their shoulder and celebrate us because we had been through so much and had survived. Her friend said, but it never happened. That must be what black people feel, Elaine thought. Last year, she decided to host a gathering of white women to talk about race. She called it What Black Women Want White Women to Know, and she invited me to be part of the conversation. She prepared a recommended reading list, books and articles that documented the history of black people in America, as well as more contemporary publications that examine their place in today's society. The list included The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michael Alexander, 2010, James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, 1963, Ta-Nehisi's Coates, The Case for Reparations, published in the Atlantic magazine in 2014, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, 2018 by Robert DiAngelo, Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad, 2016, Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns, 2011, Richard Wright's Black Boy, 1945, and the Chicago Commission on Race Relations, 1922 report, The Negro in Chicago, A Study of Race Relations and a Race Riot. Elaine was far ahead of me in researching the complexities of race. I added several of these books and more to my reading list. Anyone who doesn't understand why they shouldn't use colored in 2020 should add them to theirs as well. There is no shame in falling behind in a changing world. The disgrace is choosing to remain in the past. Alright, there's a ton to unpack here. For starters, a white woman. This is a key point because a white woman now can tell other people what black people feel. And it's completely fine. Which I also think that this is just wrong. I really don't think that it's right to be able to say that you understand what has happened to black people. I don't think it's right to say that you understand anything that hasn't happened directly to you, that you fully understand it and can tell other people this is how it felt. That does not make sense. That in this context is a little bit racist. I will say that. Another statement, the responsibility lies solely with white people. I think that that's bogus, because I think that the responsibility lies with everyone. To be able to tell people to not discriminate, to be able to tell people that racism is at its core completely wrong, and that you should always base things off of character. But that does not lie solely with white people. That lies with everyone, teaching their children and future generations this basic principle that should be followed through. But it is not. White people are not the only issue, and white people especially are not the only people who need to be doing the work in this. I'm not saying that white people have not done awful things in the past against other races. That is not what I'm saying at all. But in this day and age, everyone just needs to unify and realize that there will be some racists out there, and just try to come together and realize that we are all alike. Skin color should not matter and only based off of character. When I first started reading history, my first response to Jim Crow and slavery was, why haven't black people killed us all? That is the most racist statement I've ever heard, because that is completely generalizing white people into this giant group that apparently need to be murdered. If I'm not even going to take this as a hyperbole, because this is too egregious to be taken as a hyperbole. Why haven't black people killed us all is saying that all white people, even nowadays, all want slavery. That means that you are saying, why hasn't a black person walked up and murdered me for something that my ancestors have done? And that that makes no sense. Or not even ancestors. I guess you are an 81-year-old woman. But here is the thing. You didn't cause this specifically. Making this statement is putting your hands up and saying, I am fine to be killed because of something my peers have done. I guess you are old enough that segregation did happen when you were a child. But that is still raising your hand and saying, kill me because my peers have done something terrible. And I have always disagreed with that statement. I don't think that you should ever, especially in a classroom or anything, should be like, hey, this happens in classrooms all the time. One person did something bad, the entire class is punished. And that is what you were saying right now. You were saying because, and I'm not saying that this was one white person. There were a lot of white people who did a lot of terrible things. I cannot stress that enough. But, again, that is saying every white person should be killed because something their peers or their ancestors, or my ancestors, have done. And that does not make sense. I'm not even going to go through all the titles of books that she just randomly lists here, because I don't see a point. And I'm just going to go to, I think it's hilarious that the whole point of this article, the whole point, if you go to the actual article, the title is, Why is People of Color Okay but Not Colored People? That is the title. And then she proceeds to never explain this to us. And again, it's a very, very simple explanation of colored is racist because it just links back to segregation and how, segregated black people and white people, and it would say whites only, blacks only, or colored, and that is why colored is racist, and it was used in that time. Very simple explanation. That's all this entire article had to say, but instead it sends us to a huge reading list because they can't even answer this super simple question, which I just explained to you in about a sentence. So that renders this entire article just a huge thing of filler. I don't even, frankly, understand why this was written. Because it was supposed to explain the simple question of why we shouldn't be using the term colored, which I don't think anyone is using, especially again in 2020. But then it just sends us to a bunch of books. And this entire article, I will reiterate, is filler, and I do not know why it was written. Thank you for watching my review of this terrible article. I do not know how an opinion piece was shown in school and we had to do an assignment on it. That makes absolutely zero sense. Even if it was a super right-winged article, I still don't think that that's right because we should not be trying to sway the political opinions of children without them even knowing, because most people just nod along to this stuff. And I'm not going to do that. So I will have much more content like this, and that's all I have to say. Can we do it?